Hi guys, Dazza at Race Centre here. Here we have Mitch's MV 1090 Brutale and we're here tuning the bike. This bike's actually tuned with a different ECU, so a Microtech ECU, which are available for these bikes. And because this is like a complete tune and complete mapping of the bike, it was a great opportunity. I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about some key things or 5 things you really should understand about tuning if you're interested in it. And I guess the reason for that is just so that you know, normally with tuning ECUs and stuff, if it's the bike's OEM ECU, you're basically modifying a pre-existing map. With this Microtech ECU, it's a different ECU. They have used them in the race versions of the MVs, and the guys that supply this Microtech ECU do supply base maps and all that stuff, and they've done a great job with that. But you see a lot more than you would normally see in a normal ECU tune. So I wanted to talk about some key stuff that you should know about tuning. Okay, so probably the first thing that is really important, because sometimes you're wondering whether your bike's too lean or your bike's too rich. The first thing to know that if your bike is too lean or too rich in a way that's going to be harmful for it, you should notice it, you should feel it. Now, there is no substitute for having your bike checked if you're worried about it, if you've got an aftermarket exhaust, or you think that it's lean, having it checked on a dyno properly. There's no substitute for that. But if the bike's bad, you will feel it in terms of things like hesitation on the throttle. You're riding on the throttle and the bike wants to hesitate, or it feels like there's a flat spot or hole in it. When a bike's too rich, sometimes you'll feel a vibration and that's just because the plugs are slightly fouling up, so it will feel a bit rough and a bit of a vibration. Again, hesitation on the throttle or the bike coughing. Certainly when they're lean, they feel like there's a hole in it, and it's like, what? Like it does feel like that. And if it's lean on the bigger throttle positions, it will struggle to run and it will hesitate, and you'll notice that. So if it's bad enough for you to notice it by feel, you definitely need to have it looked at. But you may have, because we've had situations where we've had customers and people we know go, oh, I was going for a ride through the hills, and my mate noticed that sitting behind, when they were behind me, they could smell fuel, like there was unburnt fuel. My bike smells fumy, so it might be too rich. If your bike sounds fumy, that's not necessarily a sign that it's too rich. Especially if you're riding your bike and it feels awesome and the throttle response is beautiful and the power delivery is beautiful, and the only thing that makes you think it's running rich is because somebody behind you is telling you, while it's okay to pay attention to that, don't take that as gospel that the bike's too rich. Okay, so first step is, the first thing you need to understand about whether your bike's fueled properly, whether it's too lean, too rich. Number one thing is to understand is you should feel it. If the tune, the throttle response, and the power delivery feel awesome, then it's likely that it's not bad at all. So on that, so going on to the second thing now, so number 2, on that smell of unburnt fuel, your exhaust that you have in your motorcycle, that you choose for your motorcycle, is absolutely critical. So when it comes to unburnt fuel, a bike that's tuned beautifully should always have a little bit of unburnt fuel in the exhaust. And the reason for that is, as the bike goes through the RPM, you go through the throttle positions, and as it revs, if it's going to burn every single last bit of fuel in the combustion process, then it's likely going to be running lean, because it could have burnt more, but you didn't give it enough. So you're always going to have a slight little bit of fuel left over. And that's the job of the catalytic converter, or the CAT. It's to get rid of that unburnt fuel. So if you remove the CAT, if you've got a full system, then your bike's going to smell a bit fuely. Doesn't mean that it's rich or it's too rich. It just means that you've pulled your CAT out, and the component that's meant to get rid of that unburnt fuel is now gone. So the only way to make your bike not smell fuely is to make it too lean. You don't want to do that. So really important to understand the exhaust design. So before you select your exhaust, make sure it's fit for purpose for what you're doing. Most road bikes don't need a full system, yeah? Like, especially 1000cc bikes and so on. People get a little bit confused about what the cats are, and you know, some bikes have a big box underneath. That's not your cat. The cats may be in there, but that's actually a muffler. If you got a road bike, really think consciously about whether you need to get rid of the cat or not. If it's got it's like I said, 1000cc, it's got so much performance anyway. You can tune the bike with a nice slip-on, leave the cats in. That way that you're not, you know, your emissions are better. And I know, like, some of you might think that's a dirty word when we're talking about performance, but if it's not costing any real performance, then it's not a problem. Like I said, most 1000cc sports bikes these days have oodles of power, and you don't actually have to remove the cat to get the performance you want. What you do need to do is get good throttle maps and a good tune done, and that's where you'll get your performance from. So the second thing you need to understand is think carefully about your exhaust selection and the exhaust design that you're going for in terms of its intended purpose, and have a think about whether you want your cat out or not. And if you do take your cat out, you're going to have to accept that your bike is going to smell fumy if it's tuned properly, and that's because its job is to get rid of the unburnt fuel. No longer there. Unburnt fuel goes out the exhaust pipe, and your mate that's following you is going to smell it. So that's something that you need to know. Third thing that you need to know about tuning with fuel tunes, when if you're interested in about AFR or air fuel ratio, it's a range. Getting it to be specific is a little bit complicated, and that's why doing this particular tune brought that up. Because with the Microtech ECU and the software, and they've done a great job with this stuff, I must say, there's a lot of correction tables. Things like the air temperature, the water temperature of the bike. So typically, and this is in your standard road bike, in the ECU that you get with your bike, it's all in there. It's all preset, and generally you don't have to really change that stuff much. Depending on your bike, that may need some adjustment. Like I said, the guys that did the Microtech maps did a great job. I did make a few changes to some of the correction tables, and I'll explain why. But things like the coolant temperature, or the temperature of the engine, typically when an engine is cold, it can take more fuel in. As it gets hotter, it won't be able to burn as much fuel, so it has to get a little bit leaner fuel mixture to achieve the same AFR at the exhaust. So all ECUs in EFI, they have correction tables. So as the temperature of the engine changes, it makes fueling changes. As the air temperature outside and the air density, so the air pressure changes, the ECU makes corrections. This Microtech ECU in this bike now allows you to adjust how much it corrects. And you'll see in this graph, the map was really, really good, but we did part of the tune yesterday, and then when we continued today, I made a little correction, and it corrected more than I was expecting. And the difference is the air temperature in the dyno room had changed. So I modified that air temperature correction table, and it did then present exactly what I had expected. So thing you need to know as well, so when it comes to tuning, is it's not just a tuning table. So here we show you a tuning table, and I've shown you this in this in other videos. Just it's basically throttle position or throttle angle. In this particular case, it's throttle angle, not twist grip position, versus the RPM. So that's your table that you tune fueling through, that you can make modifications, and same with your ignition tuning if you're doing that. However, that's not the correction tables. So that's what you need to understand. So sometimes if you're trying to tune a bike or that type of thing, is you're saying, oh, it's a bit rich, I'll lean it off, and then all of a sudden it might do something that's a little bit unexpected. And that means it could be one of those correction tables. Maybe the engine is now running warmer, the temperature in the room that you're using is warmer, or if you're doing, if you're doing it on, you're sort of doing a DIY type of tuning, and you've got an auto tuner and you're on the road and you're trying to work it all out. You've got to understand that there's a tuning table, but then there's a lot of correction tables that you may not be seeing. So you need to understand that. That's definitely very, very important. And the third thing that you need to know about tuning or tunes in your bike. The next thing, fourth thing that I'll run on to, I've mentioned it in plenty of videos before, and we've done a separate video on them, is auto tuners. And that leads nicely in from our last topic on that. Auto tuners are great. They can, that whole tuning process, simplify it. Certainly if you're using an auto tuner on a dyno, you have quite an advantage because you've also got the dyno telling you all sorts of other things. If you are using an auto tuner on a dyno, you should also be using the dyno's AFR sensors. The drawback with the auto tuners, a lot of them work back on that table we talked about, throttle position and the RPM. So even if you remember what we talked about, the correction tables, a lot of those auto tuners aren't taking that into consideration. So while they may have a range, and the ones for the Microtech are actually quite good because they allow a percentage variation so if you set a target range where you want the AFR, they allow you a variation. So you might say I can go 2% either way, and if you do have an auto tuner, it does need to understand that there needs to be a percentage of tolerance that it allows it to miss its targets. And some auto tuners, depending how sophisticated they are, do allow you for it not to tune at certain temperatures. So if the engine's below 70 degrees, that it doesn't take any samples and doesn't try to tune it, or above a certain range. So you can tune those things out. But the thing you need to know about auto tuner, if you're putting an auto tuner in there, or using an auto tuner to tune your bike, you need to keep an eye on it. Sometimes sensors do fail. Sometimes it's getting rogue data and doing different things. We've had plenty of cases where people have brought their bikes in to be tuned because they have an auto tuner on and they feel the auto tuner is actually making it worse. Getting back to that first thing we talked about, you need to trust your feel and intuition. If your riding feels great, you've installed an auto tuner and you think, you know what, this is actually getting worse, it likely is. So while auto tuners can be a great tool, they need to be monitored. And if you don't have access to a dyno and all that type of thing, getting your bike tuned properly on a dyno by a trusted tuner is always going to be better than just plugging an auto tuner in. So definitely something you need to know about that. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on, which I've touched on plenty of times before as well, but that you need to know, piggyback units. So things like power commanders and Bazzaz units and stuff. They're great items, they really are, and they do a good job. However, if you can tune your bike through the ECU and get the same result, then it's better. And the reason it's better is because you have one less item on your bike, one less electronic device that over time is going to see bumps, heat, all that sort of stuff that eventually could start to play up or fail. We don't see it all the time, but we certainly do see piggyback units play up and fail. It's like I said, it's not, they are quite robust, but it does happen. With this particular job, this bike came in with a power commander already installed and the Microtech ECU. We were able to get the tune amazing through the Microtech ECU, so the power commander's coming off. We don't need it, there's no need to have it. Sure, tuning through something like a power commander or a piggyback unit can be easier than doing it through the ECU, for sure. And some bikes, the program and the maps you have available for the ECU are quite limited. It makes sense to put a piggyback unit on it. And some bikes you can't tune through the ECU, so you need a piggyback unit. Your tuner should be able to advise you what's the best way for your bike. Certainly here at Race Centre, we'll make a conscious decision to which way we go, depending on the bike and depending on the job. Sometimes we will use an ECU tune plus a piggyback unit. Sometimes we can only use a piggyback unit, and other times we'll just do the ECU. But if the less units you have on the bike, the better. And you only introduce units if that's the only way you can get the tune you need. But the tune on this bike came up amazing with just tuning it through the Microtech ECU. Not going to get the tune any better really with the Power Commander. And on that, so back to those fueling tables about those cells. The Microtech ECU has a lot of cells. Some ECUs are restricted, so that's where the piggyback unit might come into it. And what some people do is they go, well, I can tune a whole bunch of throttle positions on the ECU, and I can also do others that the ECU misses on the Power Commander. You could do that, but getting back to what I said earlier, AFR, there's an AFR range in corrections. If you're trying to make a perfect tune in every single little area, you better be controlling things like the room temperature, the inlet air temperature, and all that, and understanding that it's actually going to be perfect all the time. Because, again, it's a range. It's not going to be spot on all the time. But anyway, this bike's come up amazing. I know some of that stuff I've covered before, but I just thought it was a good opportunity because, like I said, using the Microtech ECU, it's a little bit different to an ECU flash type tuning. It's a complete replacement unit, and it's purpose built, and it has a lot of different correction tables and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's come up real good on that. So it's now time to go and have a listen to this thing on the dyno. And as always, have fun, but ride safe. And if you're on a racetrack, have a bloody dip.